So is your mom also spiritual?
Oh, extremely. Yeah.
How about her
Yeah.
mom?
She actually, yeah, my grandmother was very much into the Ouija board. And as a result of that, my mom had a lot of strange and bizarre experiences herself growing up. And as a result of that, we weren't allowed. You know, she
Right.
completely forbid the Ouija board in our house. And she just kind of, made us use our God-given talents and work with, the tools that you have because you're not using any other tools here. So yeah, they were kind of outlawed. And I grew up respecting that. I'm like, that's fine if you're not comfortable. I mean, I didn't seem to need a Ouija board to talk to the spirits that were there. So, to me, it was not really a big deal. Not a loss, anyway.
So were tarot cards forbidden as well?
No, no, that's actually what my mother does for a living.
Oh.
She does very well with that. So, yeah, no, that's her specialty. Absolutely. And she's also the author of A Medicine Woman Speaks by Cinnamon Moon. She's a medicine woman. So you can kind of understand with that kind of background. I mean, she's pretty open-minded.
Wow. Well, now,
Yeah.
when you moved to the farmhouse, that was in Wisconsin, was it?
Yes.
Okay. You was about 5 when you moved there?
No, I was about 8 when we moved there.
When you moved there. Okay.
Yeah. 5 was Colorado.
Then you found out that there was spirits there at that house also.
Yeah.
How did you find out that there was spirits there? I mean, were they friendly?
I walked in. I walked into the house and they were there.
They were
No,
sort of
quite
the welcome
literally.
wagon, I guess.
Actually, one of them was, yeah. There were several people that died in the house. One gentleman died upstairs of a heart attack. Another man was found underneath the dining room table. He had had a very violent death. He was a diabetic. There was a young woman, Eva, that was shot in the kitchen by a jealous boyfriend. There was a little girl who choked to death when she got excited because her dad came home unexpectedly from a business trip, and she was sitting at the dinner table eating, and she got, oh, daddy, daddy, but she started choking on her food, and she ultimately ended up dying. They couldn't save her.
Huh.
So, there was four deaths that we knew about, and all 4 of those deaths had active spirits with that, I actually had an opportunity to interview and meet with the arresting officer when the woman got murdered there. And he told me, his version of the story and what happened. And it kind of really answered some questions for us because there was a lot of things going on in that house. I mean, all of the typical stuff you see in the movies. It was, you walk down in the kitchen, all the cupboards are open, the noises, the lights, the sounds. I mean, it was just, and it wasn't like an everyday thing, but it pretty much was an every week thing. There was always something going on at a pretty steady pace. And I think part of that had to do with the fact that I did interact with them and I enjoyed it. I mean, quite frankly, it was a lot of fun because they weren't harmful and they weren't scary, but they did like their acknowledgement, to be sure. One thing that happened that was pretty interesting was how one night my mom and I were sitting on my bed upstairs in the upstairs of the house, and we heard this loud crashing sound. And it sounded like somebody just dumped out the cupboards or all the shelves fell and we ran running down the stairs expecting to have a big mess to clean up, And we got down there and there was nothing out of place. I mean, we couldn't figure out where that sound came from. And that happened on more than one occasion. And that's how eventually we solved that mystery by finding out about Eva, who was killed there. And she was actually doing dishes, standing at the kitchen counter, when he came in and shot her through the back. And when her body hit the floor, the dishes broke, so she was found with broken dishes around her. So once you kind of get the historical facts on what was going on, all of a sudden things started making more sense. When you were sitting in the living room and, you got a couple of cats that are sitting on the couch with you, and you hear a thump upstairs right above your head, that sounds like a cat jumping off a dresser, and you would think that's had to be what it was, but the cats are sitting right here with you, and there's no other cats in the house, And then we find out later that, there was a man who rolled out of bed and was found on the floor next to the bed, and he had a heart attack. So then when you start the pieces, it's kind of like a little jigsaw puzzle. When you get the history, all of a sudden these things become explained. And once they're explained, you lose that fear. Because it somehow just kind of makes sense to you, It's like, oh, that's him.
That's him.
Yeah. How old is the farmhouse? How old is the farmhouse?
Over 100, it's over 100 years old. Yeah,
so definitely people would have died in the homes. People tend to do at that point. So people tend to forget that.
Mm-hmm.
And they think, oh, somebody's died here. Yeah, it must be haunted. Well, not necessarily, but in this case, it sounds like definitely there was some residual. Yeah,
there was definitely residual, and there was definitely intelligent. Eva was intelligent. She actually would communicate pretty regularly. You could see her. She was a solid apparition in the house. My mom experienced her as well. I had friends that would come over and experience her, and then they wouldn't come back because that wasn't your mom. It's like, no, my mom's not here. Yeah, I got to go home now. I mean, literally, I grew up with kids that didn't want to come to my house because it was haunted, and they feared it. But for me, it was fun. My mom helped me with that, though. She really kind of helped me understand what was going on, and knowledge is power, and it really kind of keeps fear at a minimum. And she always kind of raised us not to live a fear-based life. You got to always come from a place of love, and that just seems to work better for us.
Wow.
So I have to ask you about hauntings in a situation like this, especially when you are so sensitive to it. Do you communicate with them and ask them why they're not moving on, or are you just respecting their right to be there?
Both, depending upon the circumstances. Obviously, like when I'm investigating, I'll certainly ask questions. I don't necessarily believe in that I have the power to make them cross over or anything crazy like that.
Yeah.
But I will ask them if they see the light, if they wouldn't mind walking towards it because they'd be happier there. I can, suggest it. But for the most part, I kind of feel like they're where they're supposed to be. I don't think that they're necessarily not supposed to be there. Because of the dying process, once the body is dead, the spirit has to transition. Okay? And that transition process is different for all of us. Some, and a lot of it's going to depend on, what level your soul is at. And, like an older soul is probably going to transition very quickly and smoothly, whereas a younger soul might drag their heels a little bit. They might not be quite so ready to go. They might not know they're dead. They might know they're dead and just aren't quite ready to let go of whatever it is that's here that makes them want to stay, So, it's kind of like the house down the road, which, that's been haunted for years. It's like it's probably some little old lady who loves her house and isn't just quite ready to leave yet. And to us, it's been haunted for 100 years. But for her, because there's no time on the other side, it's a blink of an eye. So she's only been there for, in her mind, maybe a week. But in our time, as far as the relevance goes, it might be 50 years or 100 years. So because of the discrepancy there, I just don't really feel like it's for us to kick anybody out necessarily. They have their own process and transitions to go through and their own reasons for doing it that way. I have communicated with many a spouse, men who die and do not want to walk into that light until they can do it with their wife. I've been married to that woman my whole life. I love her. I'll wait right here. And they're stubborn.
Wow.
They're just digging their heels and, they just, nope, we'll do this together. I'll wait right here for her. And it's like, who am I to tell them no? Maybe that's the way it's supposed to happen. Maybe if he left, she'd have a harder time transitioning. Maybe she's going to, maybe that's where he's going to meet her. Right?
Do you think that older generations didn't have that much knowledge of the actual going to the light once they're dead, whereas now with the emergence of all the paranormal to where a lot of the people now knows about that, do you think that those who die now and see the light would go to it quicker than somebody who died generations ago?
That's a really good question. And I feel like there's two different levels that you're talking about here. On a conscious level, we definitely know more. But on a subconscious level, we've known all along. So I think that, and again, it's going to depend on what level the soul is at. So if you have an old soul, say even 100 years ago, they know. They already know. They know they don't have to cross over right away. They know they can cross over and come back. They don't have to wait, Whereas a younger soul, is going to have a little bit less experience at that transition. And so it really has nothing to do, not nothing. I would say it doesn't have as much to do with our conscious side as it does our subconscious or our soul memory.
How many of them do you think is actually afraid to go in light?
I think it's a small percentage comparatively for all those that transition, and a lot of that actually does come back to that conscious side. We were talking a little bit before the show, and you kind of touched on it, whereas, let me see, I'm getting interrupted here. I'm sorry. Spirit's trying to come through.
Oh, really? Well, they might be trying to say something that we should know.
And believe me, they'll cut right in and they'll go off on their own little tangent, and you won't even hear a skip or a beat in my voice. It'll just take over. It's funny how it works. Oh, sometimes though it's not so funny because I'm trying to get my point across, and they'll be like, we need to interject, and then I'm like, I'm off. So. Can you restate the question for me?
Oh.
Are you blocked? Are you blocked too? That's probably what's going on.
I don't even remember what it was.
They're like, no, we don't want.
Do you remember what it was, Barbara?
For that. About him being afraid to go into the light. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
Oh, the conscious and the subconscious level.
Right.
Well,
that's what we was talking about.
Yeah. Okay. Now I'm back on track. Thank you. Say, for instance, you lived a life that was not so nice. You weren't so good to people. Maybe you were horrible. Maybe to the point where you did such terrible things that you believe that you're damned to hell and you deserve it. You're like, I'm going to hell. There's no question about it. I killed a man. I raped a woman. I did whatever, and I'm going to hell. If you believe you're going to hell, you're going to experience hell. That's just how that works.